Why are you the best band in the world?
Well, the main reason is, first of all, I'd like to say...
They are just an incredibly unique band. There is nobody else that sounds like them. Nobody else that does what they do. Other bands might try, but they're just not going to get anywhere near the Chili Peppers standards.
They put out this vibe that everybody should have a good time when you go and see them live, and that's what happens.
They've just got this kind of awareness of each other that works. They're all complete lunatics as well, but together it just comes together and it just meets in the middle.
It's that kind of unspectacular start that a lot of kind of high school bands have. I don't think they had any sense kind of direction they're going in. They were picked up on the energy of punk, but they weren't really a punk band per se.
They were immature and not that interesting, and they've grown up to become mature, complicated, interesting people with an incredible life story, and they're going to put this on a record for you.
There were stories about how the Chili Peppers would play certain towns and there would be dealers literally waiting outside for them.
They lost good friends from drugs, and it's tough to keep the lineup together. They've had personal problems and all this kind of thing. There are party bands who can actually sing about the hangover as well.
I think their other drug is music. That's the thing.
They become what they were almost 20 years ago. They're these kids, you know, who are very physical and fit and enthusiastic and got bags of energy.
It's not really about whether they're the best, you know, funk metal band anymore. They are now dominating their little slice, and there is no one else.
Hillel Slovak was from Israel, and Jack Irons, he was an American. Anthony was also American, and Flea, or Michael Bowsery as he was known then, was originally Australian. They all basically got together at high school. They formed a band called Anthem, but at that time Anthony wasn't in the band. And it all kind of progressed, and Anthony went away to a different college to study because his dad was an actor. His name was Blackie Dammit, and he used to get Anthony these little child parts.
I think he even got a part as Sly Stallone's son in Fist. What sort of guided him towards music, I think, was a mixture of things. One being, I think there was a time when he went to see Grandmaster Flash perform live, and that turned out to be a formative experience, and something where he believed he could do this. And I think the LA punk scene, which was one of the most intense and scary punk scenes, the kind of confrontation whipped up by bands like the Germs and Black Flag, I think those, you know, obviously drove him away from the idea of acting.
They went off, did their own things, met up again, formed a band called Tony Flom and the Majestic Masters of Mayhem, which eventually turned into the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
One of Flea's friends, who was a promoter in one of the clubs in LA, asked him to put a band together to open up this particular night he had, and he'd been jamming with his friends and also with Anthony Kiedis, who had previously been the band's announcer. Basically what the song was, it was called Out in LA, and it was basically a bass line that they had going around that was just repeating with Slovak kind of putting little colours in, and Anthony Kiedis was, for all intents and purposes, reading poetry over the top that he'd written.
Flea and Anthony got very interested in this kind of hardcore punk rock, and that was kind of the way that it was. They were like, wow, this is really exciting. At the time, Hillel Slovak was quite traumatized at this whole sort of hardcore thing. He thought it was disgusting, but there was something from it that Flea managed to get with that whole kind of energy thing. And if you actually watch the live performances with Flea, I mean, he's just a man possessed. He plays bass like no one else.
When they built a reputation of being like a very over-top live act, and there's plenty of sex going on, and it's a key part of their whole persona is sex and energy, good times. It's what the whole Chili Peppers thing's about. Not very clothes. It's the dirtiness of funk, you know, the sexuality of funk, mixed with the frat boy mentality of growing up as a white boy in Los Angeles.
In terms of Anthony Kiedis, that was actually the first band he'd been in, and he hadn't sung before, which I think is where his kind of unique vocal style actually comes from, because it's not always singing. In fact, it's a lot of talking and rapping and kind of that sort of thing. So really that snowballed from there.
They went on stage as this kind of jokey band, got to play some strip clubs and stuff, upstage the strippers by wearing the infamous socks on their nethers. And for some unknown reason, EMI Records decided to snap them up.
Hillel, Slovak and Jack Irons had actually signed a development deal with another company. So when EMI signed them, they had to make the choice of which they were going to stick to. And they chose their other band. At
the time, the two bands were actually neck and neck, you know, was which one's going to make it first. You can't blame those other guys for going off and doing their other project. So this didn't really help the band either, so they had to pull another rhythm section, which didn't quite understand what they were trying to do. So the whole thing, it's difficult. You can't just turn up in the studio with half your band just gone away to make a record, especially a record as complex as they're trying to make. Basically, they're punk rock guys trying to play 100 styles of music all into one song, which is something they mastered in the end, but at that point, they hadn't quite got the hang of it.
It's unheard of to go and sign your band to a major record label and then the band aren't there. I mean, what? You know, it's and to have a producer, you know, who, you know, Andy Gill, you know, in my opinion, is a musical genius. You know, his band are one of the greatest bands of my lifetime, but he was a fledgling producer. He'd not done much production. So you've got a novice band and, you know, a kind of a novice producer and two people who aren't even in the band.
I mean, they were, you know, massive admirers of Gang of Four, which is why they wanted me involved. And I think they kind of thought I'd just kind of be their pal and just give them thumbs up all the time. And when I was kind of taking issue with them over certain things and trying to make it better, that might have been a step too far. That might have been something they weren't ready for. If everybody had to be there all the time, we would have had a problem, you know, because people would go missing for 2 or 3 days.
The reality of actually working with their hero just turned out to be not as easygoing as perhaps they hoped it would be, and as a result they clashed, and Andy Gill wasn't really able to realise the sort of sound they were trying to make, which isn't that surprising if you think about the fact that the time of the record and what was actually going on. I think the Chili's really probably realised that so much later.
I was trying to get him to work with the drum machine, you know, both for timekeeping and for working off it. I mean, something which has become a really kind of standard thing, but Anthony kind of got into a philosophical position, whereas this box has no soul, I remember him saying, and it's just a box. So those are the kind of things that came up at the time.
They just acted up. They were just kids. You know, these were boys that took a lot of drugs and were quite reckless and, you know, were quite physical and brave in that kind of way. And I can just imagine it was a complete pain in the arse for poor Andy Gill to deal with. But they had a lot of growing up to do, and they you know, they've had to do it in public.
What's interesting about that album is that it's an album that's very much kind of out of time with where they were. I mean, 1984, if you think about what was going on, it was a very different era. I mean, the actual kind of new funk metal sound, I think that the Chili's actually developed, didn't really come around until a lot later. So when you listen to that record, the interesting thing about it is that they are creating something that's very out of its time.
They were trying to do something that's very, very difficult to do. There's no way you can make a classic first album what they're trying to do. It'd be impossible to learn how to do it. You just couldn't do it. But I would give anything to see them live at that time, because you'd read about the stage show, it sounded absolutely fantastic.
I mean, there's a song called Police Helicopter, which is, it's got things going for it because it's kind of funny and the lyrics are good, but musically it wasn't anything radical. I really felt that had been done, and it wasn't particularly exciting. But this other side to them, the other half of what they were doing, was new and cool.
You know, on a positive note, taken from that first album, I think you can see that these guys are onto something, you know, and that they've got this kind of energy. It's just that it's been very misdirected.
It's a group fumbling towards a sound, going somewhere where nobody's ever been before. But what makes them survive is the record labels are much cooler then. They didn't drop stuff straight away. They're a lot more patient. And in fact, they had this really great live show as well. So this reputation kept them going. They put them on the road and they started building up in the clubs. There's a lot of spade work had to be done.
I think the Chili's essentially spent the time span of the first 4 albums becoming an absolutely fantastic live band who people talked to each other when they saw them and said, you've got to go see this band. They're funk, but they're like punk, you know, and they're kind of metal as well, and they're mad, and you don't know what's going to happen. And trying to capture that kind of energy on a record is really, really hard.
Freaky Styley was their second album, came out in around 1985, and George Clinton from Parliament of Funkadelic was producing this. Now, they were big fans of George Clinton. They were very excited to be working with the man. And at that time, George Clinton was recovering from various drug problems that he'd had. So probably didn't help the fact that Anthony and Hillel were really starting to get into heroin at this stage. And George Clinton had a very kind of laid-back attitude, but he wanted to try and extract the best from them.
They would have needed someone who could command respect, and I think when George got involved, he basically kind of understood what they were doing and kind of tied them down a bit to essentially what they were getting at. And as a result, I think that he kind of puts choruses into the music. He develops a much deeper kind of groove to the band, you know, and the band really sort of come alive for him, I think.
You can start to hear Flea's bass style really starting to come out, and Flea has the most unique way of playing bass. Nobody plays it like him. He kind of slaps the bass. He doesn't play it like your average bassist would, where he's just kind of stuck to forming just these basic kind of shapes on the bass. He plays it. It's almost like he's playing bass like you would play a guitar, and he's using the full capabilities of it. And George Clinton really helped bring that out.
The Chili Peppers are great musicians, and that's actually quite apparent on the first record. But on the second one, you can tell that they're really getting into that, and I think that they'd be in their element.
They included a Sly Stone cover. They had James Brown's horn section in there, and also it was the return of Hillel Slovak. So now it was like the band was starting to be back to how they should be, and they were also starting to do their first European dates at this time too.
George Clinton did the exact opposite to Andy Gill, being from an exact opposite background. He you know, acknowledged that they were great musicians, but also saw that they were young boys who wanted a laugh. And you know, he said, right, come on, let's go into my studio, let's have a party. It must have been, you know, a really extraordinary experience for them.
You listen to that record and you think, God, I bet they're amazing live. I wish I could hear what they're like live at that time, you know. I think a live album at that time would be something, or to actually go and see him, go back in time to see him at that time playing the club, would have been a way to experience the early Chili Peppers.
I think by employing Clinton, the record companies thought that perhaps they could rescue and, you know, bring out this smash album that was going to, you know, make them on their path. What I think they needed is that break to sort of find their own space within the band, find their own sort of style. And one thing they did always have again was that energy floating through.
For the Freaky Styley album that Hillel Slovak had actually come on and started playing guitar. Jack Sherman had left the band. He was only really a session musician for the first album anyway, but we still had Cliff Martinez on drums. And they actually sacked Cliff Martinez and recruited Jack Irons again, and he was back behind the drum set. He basically saw the way that the Chili Peppers were going and said, yeah, you know, Hillel and I, we've always been together. We've kind of got to be together again now. So a lot of the gap was touring, getting together with this new band, and then working with Michael Beinhorn with the Uplift Mofo Party Plan, which was the first Chili Peppers album really to capture that whole essential Chili Peppers sound that you'd heard in the demos.
The band sounds really good here. It sounds really slick. It sounds like they can play together. The grooves are good. The songs are good. And it's a first proper definitive Chili album. If you're somebody just getting into now and you back check, you go through all the back catalogue. That's the one. The first one that comes out you can actually recognise. You go and see them at that time. There wasn't really that big a crowds going to see it, but people were really into them. You know, they're like an obscure cult band, which seems weird now. They're the biggest band in the world. They're kind of like this kind of strange band that came from America, doing this kind of like really weird cross section of styles. Which on that album they actually mashed the two things, the punk and the funk. They mashed them together really, really well.
They're more comfortable in what they're playing. The songs are coming out better. The whole process is smoother. But there is still that underlying pin of the drug problems. Which, you know, perhaps might fuel the kind of wacky side of it. At the same time, it's taking away, causing underlying problems between different band members and, you know, generally just causing havoc.
There were a lot of problems with them, again, not turning up to rehearsals, Hillel and Anthony really getting stuck into the whole heroin things. I mean, they were cancelling tour dates and stuff because there were times when Hillel had just taken so many drugs that he'd just passed out or he'd gone missing for a few days, and they had a real problem just basically trying to keep the band together.
They needed someone to say, look, you know, okay, you're pissing away, you know, thousands of millions of pounds of major record company money and you can't keep doing this. You will just get dumped and you'll be, you know, regretting it for the rest of your lives. And they obviously respected him enough to hear this and do it, which I don't think makes it, you know, a classic album by any means, but at least with something like Fight Like a Brave, for example, you got it. It was like the Beastie Boys, except instead of with turntables and whatever, it was with drums and bass and guitar, and guys shouting and going "Fight like a brave." You know, suddenly they made sense.
Michael Beinhorn had just basically pulled it all together and managed to make some kind of sense of it. I mean, wow, he did a superb job on it. It must have been a really, really tough thing to try and pull all four members together to try and sort out all the drug problems and just get the stuff down on tape and, you know, commit it to that. And it's quite interesting because there were a couple of songs that were actually left over from the Uplift Mofo Party Plan, one of them being this incredible version of Jimi Hendrix's Fire, which actually later crops up on the Mother's Milk album. And it also appeared on the somewhat infamous Abbey Road EP.
The Abbey Road EP was basically a sort of mini greatest hits up until that point to put out so that, you know, the people in England could say, oh, you know, this is what this band is. But what they did on this is they added, I think, their first sort of real hit, which was a cover of Jimi Hendrix's Fire. They did it with such energy and such kind of life that you can't help but be drawn into it. The sort of socks on cocks thing had become a little bit of a trademark with them, which stemmed from Kiedis trying to get rid of an annoying female fan by answering the door with nothing but a sock on. And then they all sort of jumped on it, did it on stage. And it was little things like that that kind of stuck in people's memory about what would maybe be, you know, a partially forgettable band up until that point.
They'd done their first major tour around the UK as well, and at which point they all sort of, afterwards they all split up and just went their separate ways to sort of recoup from the tour, and it was when Hillel, Slovak, died from a heroin overdose.
There were stories about how the Chili Peppers would play certain towns and there would be dealers literally waiting outside for them. And Anthony and Hillel had been on the road and they had managed to stay pretty much clean. After the tour, Hillel was like, I've got to go back on it. And the story basically goes that they'd come off the tour, Hillel gone back to his flat, and he died on the Friday, and it took until the Monday for his body to actually be found.
The four of them had been friends since high school and, you know, were sort of fairly inseparable. And when Flea got the call to say, listen, I want you to sit down, something's happened, he assumed it was Kiedis who was dead.
It really knocked them for six. Jack Irons ended up having a nervous breakdown and he actually went into psychiatric care for quite a long time. Flea just kind of tried to pretend it wasn't happening, celebrating the birth of his daughter. Anthony checked himself into rehab and just pretty much cleaned up there and then, sweated it out, just got his life back together again. And he and Flea said, what are we going to do? Are we going to try and carry on with this band, or are we going to call it a day? And they decided to carry on with the Red Hot Chili Peppers, thank goodness.
There's something about the Red Hot Chili Peppers from the beginning which had that feel that the best bands have, of it's like a crusade. And if you don't find the right people, no matter how great they are as musicians, that spirit never emerges.
Hillel Slovak is a great guitar player, but John Frusciante's just really special guitar player, isn't he? I mean, of all the people you could audition and try and get to be in a band, you think it'd take you 4 or 5 goes before you found, you know, somebody that good, and he just come in and he's absolutely perfect. He was a super fan, so he knew all the songs anyway, so he just turns up and he can play all the Chili Pepper stuff, but he's also a great songwriter, so suddenly they got this like little whiz kid, because remember he's a lot younger than them. They must be like going, God, how did that happen?
And say hello to never all the people.
He brings this whole other wonderful dimension. He has loads of influence from Hillel Slovak. I mean, he was a massive fan of him. But as he became a member of the Chili Peppers, it was great to sort of see him bring in this whole other depth.
He plays with an almost very clean guitar sound, but doesn't play the sort of natural chords that you'd expect any guitarist to play. He always finds other ways of playing it. And with Chad Smith as well, they'd auditioned about 30 drummers, and Chad Smith just had that groove kind of thing. Apparently when he turned up for his audition, he was wearing a bandana and had all his hair out everywhere, and Anthony Kiedis had said to him, you know, you've got to lose all that kind of thing. But he was so compassionate about playing in this band and wanted to keep his image the same that he didn't change himself. When Anthony Kiedis saw that, he thought, you know, this is the guy for us kind of thing. He just wants to come in and play with us. And so it was at this point that the real classic lineup of the Chili Peppers was to evolve.
When I first heard Mother's Milk, when it first came out, I loved the album. It was actually my favourite Chili Peppers album at that stage. It was a lot rockier from the stuff that they'd been doing before. They still had the sort of the punk funk stuff on there, but I think it was really sort of Chad's influence and maybe having a younger guitarist in the form of John Frusciante that kind of made them just that little bit more kind of rocky, metal-y.
Knock Me Down is the first turning point on the way to the Red Hot Chili Peppers becoming the Red Hot Chili Peppers. It's so far and away the first great song that they wrote.
It was written about Hillel, for Hillel, but obviously after Hillel had actually died, it was all about sort of Anthony trying to put himself in Hillel's shoes and really still feeling guilty about what had happened.
And it was about missing him, and it was about what they thought they might have done wrong, and it was about, you know, almost asking their fans to say, you know, if I start behaving like I'm better than life, like I'm bigger than life, like I've got no connection to you, knock me down.
It features Alex Winter, who was starting to get quite a big career at the time with the Bill and Ted movies and also with his part in The Lost Boys. And he's just kind of like this little lost guy who's wandering in a big house from room to room.
It was the first time they'd done a proper video, and at that time the MTV generation, you know, it was all starting to pick up there, which helped promote the band a lot. It was also the first song that the band would hear on the radio of themselves, and they knew that they were kind of going somewhere.
The first time I heard it, I was completely shocked it was them. You know, I just didn't think they had it in them, and I think the fact that they allowed each other to do the song, and that it worked, the world went, yeah. I think it just gave them a whole lot of confidence to go, okay, we really don't have to be this knucklehead funk metal band. You know, we really can do other things.
In this particular album, this is where the groundwork was laid for what we would all come to know as the Chili Peppers in their prime.
Of course, there's the famous Stevie Wonder cover version of Higher Ground, and that's the track that I would have gone out and bought the record for.
It is a track that Anthony is more kind of singing in rather than rapping in. I love it. I think it's a great track. The video is just crazy, all people just having a great time, and Anthony pulling great dance moves as he usually does.
Those are the kind of pop songs I think they then go on to actually develop. And that's where you can kind of hear a much more kind of Hendrixy style in John Frusciante. I think his playing is much hookier.
I think Rick Rubin was a saving grace. He sort of took this band that even on Mother's Milk, it was much closer to, you know, there was still all that kind of wildness going on. And he saw them, I think, on the last date of the Mother's Milk tour. And he said, like, you know, I can do something with this.
He wanted to take them away to somewhere completely different where he could capture a vibe. And so they went to a really old haunted mansion and recorded the whole album in this haunted mansion. They set up in like the main room as the sound room, and then in another room they set up everything like as the control room. They all lived in, they never went away, so they all had their own bedrooms upstairs and stuff. And this was how he wanted to work with them. He wanted to do something completely different that would bring out their best, and it really did with Blood, Sugar, Sex, Magik, I think.
The house, by the way, is an ancient Hollywood ruin, and it's, of course, haunted.
We had these psychics that came up here, and at one point they said that they saw a lady in black walking in the back, and she was a ghost.
This is the world famous Rick Rubin, my favorite record producer in the whole world.
He's a long-haired hippie love child who, you know, just wants to hang out and make beautiful music for the people and for all the kids and make everybody happy, and it's a wonderful thing.
He's famously kind of gone into the Chili's rehearsal room and just laid on the couch and apparently, to all intents and purposes, fallen asleep, listening to them doing the kind of run-throughs of what will be their album. And that's his style. He's asleep on the couch, but basically listening and taking... The band at the time are really worried, you know, they think oh my God, he hates us, you know, he's going to hate what we do, you know, but that's his style, and you know, he's got all these interesting sort of quirks, and I think it kind of works because if you're involved in a very sort of mad metal environment, someone like that you kind of need.
There were notebooks lying around of Anthony Kiedis' lyrics, and Rubin did a rude and nosy thing and started poking around in them to find out what he'd been writing, and found one particular lyric and was really struck by it, and said to Kiedis, well, you know, have you got a tune for this? What's this? This is great. This is the one. And you know, Kiedis is like, oh, it's really kind of emotional and introspective and confessional, and I think they'll just laugh at me. It's just whatever. And he's like, no, this is the one. This is the one. I think this is great. You know, I'm going to make you come out and sing this to the rest of the band. And you know, he walked out of there and he sang Under the Bridge.
And Anthony Kiedis wasn't really confident in doing it because it was more singing than rapping, and also it was very slow, and he didn't think it was at all the Chili Peppers vibe.
It was just this moment of chance almost, which allowed Kiedis to see that his bandmates, you know, didn't require him to be Mr. Macho, Dick at the front. You know, that they accepted him on different levels to that, and that they were all ready to grow up.
There was a lot of publicity surrounding it. Gus Van Sant had actually produced the video, and Flea had appeared in Gus Van Sant's movie My Own Private Idaho at around the same time as well.
Everything about it is great, and I think that's why it still to this day is a live favourite or a record favourite. It got covered by the All Saints. As before, Under the Bridge would probably be a lot more hectic than it is. There would have been a lot more going on in it, and it doesn't need it. It's a simple song.
Just says, right, well, let's cut away all the baggage that you've accrued around yourself and all of this crap that you've been covering up what you really are with, and let's get to the essence of you. And that is what he did on that album, and particularly on Under the Bridge and Give It Away, which were just on a completely different planet to anything they'd ever done before.
It was the sound that they'd been trying to get on to tape pretty much since the first album. Finally they did it, and the production on it is just so superb. It's just a really, really slick production that just exposes the best of the band with all lots of different experimental elements. And, you know, Rick Rubin had to shut them in a haunted house to actually get this track, and it is one of the classic Chili Peppers tracks.
It's a really great song, but the thing that really makes it is the vocals. It's such a great rap on it.
What I've got, you got to give it to your mama. What I've got, you got to give it to your papa. What I've got, you got to give it to your daughter. You do a little dance, then you drink a little water. What I've got, you got to get it, put it in you. What I've got, you got to get it, put it in you. What I've got, you got to get it, put it in you. Reeling with the feeling, don't stop, continue.
It's a rollicking great groove, really great rap. Fantastic chorus where it all drops out and it's like really childish. The whole little package of that single is absolutely fantastic.
I think it was filmed in black and white, but they were all painted up silver, and so they had this really strange image to it. But yeah, the song is absolute classic Chili Peppers. It's very funk, it's very rhythm-led. It's got these sort of choppy guitar lines over the top, and it's got Anthony Kiedis, you know, doing that whole rapping thing. It was their first, you know, really big commercial hit after Under the Bridge, showing that was where they were from. That was the sort of style that they were more into.
You go see them live now, yeah, and you see them for 40,000 people. The one that kicks off right to the back of the stadium is Give It Away.
what makes that a Chili's classic is because it represents everything that the Chili Peppers were and are, and it's wrapped up in this kind of really tight, neat package of, you know, give it away. It's one of the points where Frusciante shines as well, because Flea is kind of playing the main riff in this song, and Frusciante is kind of just sitting on it.
They are just totally wild and unleashed. They do what they want to do, and that's one of the reasons why they've become as big as they have become, but it's taken them a long time to get that way.
Right from the early days, they'd make this thing that they thought was a fabulous piece of art, and then they'd whip their dicks out. And I think Frusciante was frustrated about this element of Kiedis and Flea that always had to whip their dicks out, you know, and that he felt it actually stopped them from being the band they really, really could be.
Now they were suddenly this successful band who were, you know, getting on MTV, and they were about to get a cover on Rolling Stone magazine as well, and they got this #2 in the Billboard charts, and he just felt that he wasn't good enough, that he couldn't carry on doing what the Chili Peppers wanted him to do.
When I joined the band, I couldn't believe that they wanted to be this other thing than they were, you know? Like, they didn't think, like, I thought of them as huge stars, you know, but to them they weren't famous yet, you know, and they hadn't made it yet, and they wanted to be as big as Aerosmith or whatever, you know, and I couldn't, like, that was a shock, yeah. I hoped that we would stay at the level that we were at in popularity.
It was at a gig in Japan just before they were due on stage, and Anthony Kiedis turned up. They'd all travelled to the venue separately, and after the shows in Japan, they were supposed to be going on to Australia. It was quite a big tour, and Anthony Kiedis turned up, and John Frusciante apparently said to him, "I'll die if I don't get out of this band. It will kill me." And so instead of actually cancelling the gig, they went ahead and did that last gig, and after that, John flew straight back to Los Angeles, and in theory, he was going to try and clean himself up. But the opposite happened. He just lived in squalor and became a huge, you know, heroin addict.
Okay, you want me to say something soulful? Drugs. I'm a junkie and I love shooting up, and that means I'm self-destructive, and you know, is that good enough?
I don't know. Did you feel that was a true statement, or?
Yeah.
Oh.
And he sat there for however many years it was, and tried to kill himself with drugs until all his teeth dropped out, until his arms were covered in scars, and until he was in hospital, you know, inches away from dying. And you know, and he explains that it wasn't for the same reasons that the likes of Kiedis and Flea and Slovak became drug addicts. You know, it was because he'd been very depressed ever since he was a child. He heard voices in his head. He had mental health issues, and being in the band at that point had brought them out and made things even more difficult for him, and he self-medicated.
The guys basically needed to start rehearsing and finding a new guitarist because they had Lollapalooza Festival coming up, which is this great big festival in America which is run by Perry Farrell from Jane's Addiction, and they actually phoned up Dave Navarro from Jane's Addiction and said, you know, can you please come and do the band? And he's like, I can't, you know, I've got my own band going. So they started kind of putting their heads together again, thinking about who could possibly be a replacement for John Frusciante. And Flea remembered this guy called Eric Marshall, who's described as a skinny bluish kid, and a basically black Jewish kid that he remembered, and he trained him up on the songs, and he did play well. After about a year, he couldn't hack it. It just wasn't happening, and he left the band. They tried a few more auditions. I think they had another guy, and there was Jess Tobias as well from Love and Hate. He stayed in the band for about a month, and then all of a sudden it was announced that they had finally managed to get Dave Navarro from Jane's Addiction. They put together an album called One Hot Minute, which is very, very, very different from anything that they'd done before, and almost developed a sort of very dark, maybe even slightly gothic image.
In Blood, Sugar, Sex, Magik, they'd almost become dependent on Frusciante's sort of ability to know where to put himself and to play what he plays. And then you're coming all in again, starting with a new guy, And it's certainly nothing against Dave Navarro or the album itself, because there's 2 or 3 tracks on the album that I think are really good. My Friends is one of them. I thought that was a really good song. And Aeroplane I thought was a great tune.
Yes, it's not as good as the classic records, but it's not a bad record by any means. You know, there's some really great moments on that record. You know, and Aeroplane is one of the great moments, and it's just one of the great Chili Pepper songs. I mean, obviously you can hear bits that Jane's Addiction, because the guitar player is from Jane's Addiction, he's writing songs with Jane's Addiction, so there's a bit of that sound mixed in there. But to me, Aeroplane, if you listen to Chili Pepper's greatest hits and you put all the singles in a row, you don't go, "Whoa, that's a weird one." It sounds, to me, it doesn't sound massively different from anything they normally do.
I can make it disappear, have no fear.
In fairness, they were kind of, it was kind of impossible to fill the boots of someone who'd been so closely knit in with the band and such an integral part of the band.
I think it was a sensibility, and certainly part of that was, you know, this idea of just standing, which Ruben had totally encouraged them to do, of just sitting in the studio and jamming and jamming and jamming. Navarro wasn't into that. He wanted to be told his guitar part, or to write his guitar part over a set structured set of chords, and go in and record it and walk back out.
I don't think that Dave really was a proper Chili Pepper. As much as I loved the One Hot Minute album, as much as I loved, you know, when he was on stage with them, because I was a big Jane's Addiction fan as well, you know, I think he wasn't really a proper Chili Pepper. And it was a bit of a shock when I found out that John Frusciante was coming back to the band, because I honestly didn't think, I thought he would be the last person who would ever walk back into the Chili Peppers.
They sort of brought him back from the depths of heroin sort of addiction, fixed up his teeth, and sort of, you know, got him a guitar, put him in the garage, and they all started jamming in the garage. And I think when that happened, the sense of sort of relief in everyone just spurred on this massive inspiration.
I think Californication was a really good album. There is a confessional spirit to it. The title kind of says it all. It was, you know, an album about what had happened to them up to this point, but not in that kind of really, really kind of self-pitying or even intensely direct way. You know, something like Scar Tissue, you listen to it, you've got to do a bit of work yourself, you know, about what he might mean. It's not just going to be all chucked on a plate for you. They give their audience some credit for intelligence, and but the tunes were on a different level to what they've been writing before.
John Frusciante came back and said, I just could write songs, I just play guitar all day. He got addicted to the guitar instead. And he just endlessly writes and writes and writes, you know.
With Scar Tissue, that really is sort of Frusciante in his element. He's playing very, very sparse guitar, but just, he's got this kind of really weird ability of like playing something so simple and making it so interesting. It's kind of, at times it's really jazzy, but at times it's really kind of childish, and if you couple that with his, by now, like sort of almost psychic ability to interact with Flea, it's just one unit. When I heard Scar Tissue, that's when I knew that they sort of returned, you know, that this was going to be the one that was going to set them off again.
It was basically a ballad album. It was kind of like, ooh, you know, we want to have some more hits again, or John Frusciante's back in the band, let's go all serious and prove that we're not just these silly guys that walk around with socks on our dicks, and let's write something serious. And so it was just an album of these kind of really serious tracks like Scar Tissue and Californication, and it was just like, oh,
I think the band is you know, at this stage, they're becoming a mainstream, world-dominating live band. And I don't think that they could keep... It's the same with any band, you know, you can't stay in the underground forever and ever, not because that's a bad thing, but because you would naturally want to progress, and I think that they're not doing anything they don't want to do. The album, how good is it? Well, I think they continue to develop.
It's kind of a dark soul to them, which they kind of captured on that album as well. So it does work on a lot of different kind of levels, but the songwriting is absolutely fantastic on it. I don't care if it doesn't sound like the old stuff. It's probably their best album. There's some really great songs on it. There's a really good kind of variation of all different little things they do really well on that record. You know, you can hear bits of Fugazi in there. You can hear bits of 60s pop music and melodic stuff. You can hear Beach Boys in there, the Beatles in there. You can hear the Gang of Four in there. You can hear all that kind of post-punk stuff. It's not as heavy, it's not as in your face, but they can't keep doing the same thing all the time.
They can play it loud and they can play it hard, but they learn how to, you know, that it's not about blasting away anymore, that, you know, it's about dynamics and it's about subtlety and it's about highs and lows. They have families and friendships and relationships and a life. And Californication sounded like the album where, you know, a bunch of guys stopped being chaos.
They hit such a mark with the kids, and I think that meant that when By the Way came out, everyone was just waiting and expecting what's it going to be. So I think a lot of people, out of sentimental reason, would probably say Californication is their album of choice, but I think By the Way is just brimming full of brilliant ideas, brilliant songs. I don't know, it's like a happy album.
But they've moved almost completely away from the sexy songs, and they are sort of more serious perhaps, but in a kind of a mature way. It's almost like they've grown with their fans. They're not writing silly songs anymore. But, you know, I guess, you know, when you start reaching a certain age, you start maturing and realise that you can't do silly, sexy songs forever, and there are more important things in your life, and you just want to write about those things. But I think maybe that was sort of the natural album that should have come after Blood, Sugar, Sex, Magik in terms of the actual style of the material. By the Way was the mature Chili Peppers sound.
And that intro is a classic example of Flea and John Frusciante playing together. It's just a really close-knit riff that they appear both to be doing. And then it opens up into this kind of fast-paced, rocking kind of song. It's got that rock element with the big, heavy chorus.
It's like here's what we did before and here's what we do now. And we are the same, you know, it's the same band, you know, like at Uplift.
Yeah, this is a Chili Peppers song. You can definitely hear there's no one else that would do a song like this. It was refreshing after hearing Californication to hear something that was a proper Chili Peppers album.
It sounds like the old Chili Peppers just stuck bang smack into the new Chili Peppers. It's like the groove shouldn't fit, it shouldn't fit at all, but it just kind of does, doesn't it? Because it's the Chili Peppers and they get away with anything.
It's the result of four men who love music and who have had their life saved by it and are kind of giving back. You know. And, you know, By the Way, I think is just an extraordinary sort of achievement, really, considering where they were when they started.
Is By the Way a rubbish album, or, you know, can they ever do what they've done before? That's not really the point. They're still here, and people love it.
Someone can put on a Chili's album and they're going to hear a whole bunch of different sort of songs. So I think they do very well with it, you know, that their old stuff and their new stuff, despite being different, seems together very nicely.
There's nobody else out there doing what the Chili Peppers do, and I don't think anybody would dare try it either, because it takes something very, very special, which is why I think they're a sort of a standalone band, you know.
They've got that piece of the pie sorted out, just as Green Day have got their piece of the pie sorted out, and REM have got theirs, and U2 have got theirs. It's not really about whether they're the best, you know, funk metal band anymore. They are now dominating their little slice, and there is no one else.
There is nobody else that sounds like them, nobody else that does what they do, nobody else that can write the way that they do. Other bands might try, but they're just not going to get anywhere near the Chili Peppers standards.
If you're in a band and you go long enough, you find what you're really good at, so you get the confidence to not necessarily stick to exactly the same kind of style, but it kind of infuses all your music, this kind of confidence, which is like really important to them. And they've got so many good songwriters in the band, and I think they've got a perfect lineup. It's just a magical lineup that just works really well together.
Those four guys, just sort of all, they're on the same frequency, you know, they're on the same wavelength, which is quite apparently a very different wavelength to most other people, but it's a wonderful wavelength to be on, it seems.
I tried to say I'll be there, waiting for